If I have this for the whole video, will it be distracting? I just really love doing Lemmy Drag. Lemmy Drag should be more of a thing. Welcome to Daily Metal, where every day a different metal album gets dissected for your sadistic listening pleasure. I'm the heavy metal lawyer Emma, and in this show I'll talk about why the music in these albums is so good and where they fall in the history of music's most wretched genre. On August 10th, 1986, Motorhead attempted to be louder than ever and make us all deaf forever with their album Orgasmatron. Folks, it is finally time to talk about Motorhead, arguably the most influential metal band of all time. And there's a million things you can talk about with this band and the history of metal. But I'm going to focus on the history around this album for this video. Just do general sketches of the rest so that it doesn't go on for an hour. I promise we will definitely cover more Motorhead in the future. Anywho, Motorhead formed in 1975, so by 1986, when this album came out, the band had been playing for over 10 years. Already had 6 albums under their belt, including their 3 most successful albums, Overkill, Bomber, and Ace of Spades. In addition to the popularity of those albums and the band's amazing and energetic live shows, the band had already made its mark by influencing the formation of multiple metal subgenres. Hopefully in a future video I'll get a chance to discuss the band's influence on crust punk, particularly bands like Auction and Inepsy. It's one of my favorite things about Motorhead's place in metalhead history. But the one way that they were most influential that was apparent in 1986 was the subgenre of thrash metal. While Motorhead's influence on thrash metal is uncontroversial, I'm not paving new ground by talking about it, I really don't think it can be overstated. The chunky, distorted bass tone that takes center stage in the song Ace of Spades intro is a sound that thrash bands frequently use to this day, both in solo bass parts and for bass parts in general. And the double bass drumming in the title track of Overkill is similarly influential on thrash metal drumming. And of course, the thrash metal band Overkill got their name from that album. Pretty much every one of the big 4 thrash bands, both for the US Big 4 and the Canadian Big 4, were Motorhead fanboys, and pretty much every single one of them played shows with Motorhead at some point in their careers. Though it seems like Megadeth in the US and Anvil in Canada got along with Motorhead the best. Which is all pretty fun because, as Dave Mustaine of Megadeth himself recognized, with thrash, while thrash adopted the tone of Motorhead's bass and drums respectively, the guitar, songwriting, and attitude of Motorhead's music versus thrash metal were very different. Prior to the album Orgasmatron, Lemmy's biggest support of other bands during that time were the Plasmatics and Girls' School, who both were that same stew of punk metal and 1950s rock and roll as Motorhead, way more melodic and bluesy and adopting attitudes of rebelliousness and cool, rather than the macho aggressiveness and outsider weirdo energy of most thrash metal at that time. You know, the Trenchcoat Mafia, Columbine Shooter Chic. Please don't complain about that joke. All of this is to come around to the fact that Motorhead, after more than 10 years of already being one of the most influential metal bands of all time, and in the year when their baby thrash metal was exploding in popularity, was fucking screwed by their record label Bronze. They had a very long and protracted litigation with the label, And I can tell you as a lawyer that when you have an ugly lawsuit against a company you worked with, other companies in that industry won't want to work with you, even if the lawsuit was clearly not your fault. So despite all their early success and their baby thrash metal success, none of the big record labels wanted to touch them. So Motorhead's management had to start their own record label, and Orgasmatron was the first release on that label. And unfortunately, it is apparent that it was the first release on a new label by a very experienced and good band. If you all watched my video on 5 great albums not on Spotify, you saw me talk about how I love the album Creation and Destroy by Declone, specifically because it is the best capturing of that D-beat live show energy I've ever heard. It really is an impressive feat to do that, and while I talked in that video mostly about how songwriting is a big part of getting that sound to happen on an album, Orgasmatron shows how crucial sound engineering is to capturing the same energy of a live show in a studio album. As members of the band put it, they were super happy with the album as they wrote it, but when they listened to it after it had been mixed, they felt like it had been done a disservice. The album was produced by Bill Laswell, and I don't want to be a hater, that's not what this channel's about, but he kind of has a history of doing this to heavier bands, such as The Burning World by Swans and Make Them Die Slowly by White Zombie. I really don't see how Laswell couldn't have known, even with basic research, what the MO of Motorhead was. We're talking about a band that 2 years earlier, in 1984, had made headlines for a concert reaching 130 decibels, as loud as a jet taking off from an aircraft carrier. So loud it caused plaster to fall from the ceiling, and they had to stop the show, and the venue wound up closing because of a court order related to the incident. And Laswell was really like, so yeah, with this mix, I'm going to try to dampen everything down except for the drums. If you listen to live versions of Deaf Forever from that same year compared to the album version, it's genuinely shocking how different it sounds. Even in the 1980s level bootleg video, the live sounds better than the studio. The studio backup vocals on that track, Jesus, they sound like the sound you hear when you click on a guy in a video game like Warcraft. It's really bad. Alright, I'll stop whining about the production. If you can't tell, I actually love the tracks on this album. They're some of the best songs you see on Motorhead's later live albums, like the amazing live album in 1993, No Sleep at All, which featured the tracks Dr. Rock, Built for Speed, and Deaf Forever, all 3 standout tracks from this album. The title track, Orgasmatron, gets a lot of love from fans, including fans' Brazilian death metal band Sepultura, who covered it on their great album Arise. You can tell with the backup vocals on Deaf Forever that at this point, Motorhead wasn't just writing songs that sounded great live, like Ace of Spades, but songs that were written specifically to be played live. Sadly, the production on Orgasmatron just doesn't capture that sound, but fortunately it would be captured when the songs from that album were performed and recorded for the many live albums subsequently. So, are you bothered by the production on Orgasmatron, or do you think that I'm being a baby about it? Let me know in the comments, and if you like this video, please subscribe so you can find out what the metal album of the day is, why it is so brutal, and where it fits in the history of the genre.